And okay, so this is what we're going to talk about: selling to value, not price. And sales is really what this is all about. Now there's let's see, one, two, three, four, five of you. So when we have a group like this size, it's really opportunistic because we can have more of an open discussion. And you guys are all in different industries, different businesses, and so I would rather really talk about how this stuff fits into your business model than just run through a bunch of slides. So the reason I bring that up is you're going to see in a minute, we're going to be going from subject to subject. And when you have a question, you'll forget, because if you don't ask right away, we'll be on a different subject. And so what I recommend is you just stop me, unmute yourself, keep yourself unmuted if there's not a lot of noise in the background, you could do that, but unmute and mute at will if you prefer, and just interrupt me and ask the question. You could use the chat if you want, but I'm not too proud to be interrupted. So I'd rather talk about what you want to work on than what I have prepared. And so, feel free to go ahead and ask and participate. And I'm going to ask you to do some things and get feedback from you along the way. Okay? All right. So here we go. Here's what I want to talk about. A lot of times when I first meet with a company and I ask them, okay, tell me about what your goals are, I get something like, well, you know what, we're coming out of COVID and I think things are looking pretty good. So, I'd like to increase my sales 10%. Okay. Well, what's the science in that? Why 10%? What we really want to be doing is, and part of what I'm going to be talking about today is, what is your strategic plan? For example, I've got a client that makes movie camera batteries, right? They manufacture batteries, and there's a 10,000-pound gorilla in that market. And everywhere their salespeople go, it's like, oh, I use these guys. Hey, you know what? Let me tell you about how good our product is. We have better technology. We have better longevity. I use these other guys, okay? And he came to me and he said, look, I want to grow my sales 30% this year. They're tracking 45% right now. Okay, and he's like, how am I going to motivate these guys? Well, did you tell them if they keep going at the rate they're going to own 50% of the U.S. market in 3 years? Own it. And by the way, at the end of this year, they will be selling more product in the United States than that 10,000-pound gorilla. And these guys are motivated, but those are real, meaningful objectives. Okay. And so, it's important to really have a pulse on the market, and then you don't have to be right, but, if let's just say, here's another example. During COVID, right, I talked to this company that was basically off 45% because a big market that they were in was dead. It was 100% dead. Okay, nothing happening. So I said, well, all right, well, look, if we were to get your sales team tracking the right kind of customers you want, how many would you need? Well, it'd be like 2 per month per customer. Okay, so that's 24 deals, right? And I said, well, how many customers do you have? Well, right then his wife walked by from the Zoom meeting. And he says, well, how many deals did we do last year? 1,600. Well, you know what? There's a lot of those 1,600s that just are not their ideal targets. So if you take a look, these are the kinds of customers we want. How many more are we going to get? And set that as an objective. That's a meaningful goal, okay? And then the rest of it is really, what's your plan to get there, right? So you want to select the right markets and then have a prospecting plan and a marketing plan that gets you to these right customers, and have a messaging system that gets their attention and gets conversations and gets meetings for you, okay? And the challenge here is, again, we're talking about how to sell value. How to sell value. So, I'm having this conversation almost on a weekly basis because that's the message I'm putting out there that's catching people's attention. Is like, look, we are 15% more than our competition. And if that's the case, you obviously have a product that's better. And so you need to find people who care about that and engage them in a conversation and then find out, do they care about that? Okay. And what's your formula for doing that? Knowing your formula and then executing on the formula, because that's a big challenge. If you're not regularly prospecting, then you will not avoid the roller coaster. Okay. And so somebody needs to be doing that and then measuring it so that your formula is actually playing out and that you will consistently have predictable results and then work on continuing to grow. Okay. And then stick with it. All right. So this is what we're going to talk about today, hopefully in an hour and a half. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. So these are the pieces. You have to have a marketing plan, a prospecting plan, have the tracking systems, and then a sales process that enables you to weed through tire kickers and people who just, are going to push you to price. And I'm going to be touching on each one of these subjects. Okay. The first thing is marketing and prospecting and sales. These are not the same thing. You need all three to effectively be selling and growing, okay? And people confuse that, right? Marketing is generating awareness, but it's more than awareness. People need to actually be curious about whether or not you can solve a problem for them and decide that they're going to spend time with you to determine, do they want to do business with you, okay? Selling does not start until that's happened. And, I was talking to a prospective customer yesterday, and the sales manager doesn't believe that cold prospecting works. You know why? Because they don't know what's going to get someone's attention. They don't know how to do that, right? So, it's not what you can do. It's not that, hey, I happen to be in the area. Who cares about that? It's not like, look, here's what we do. Here's how we help customers. And here's what makes us different. That's sort of, you're dancing around it. But when you think about that whole conversation is about you. People really don't care about you. They care about themselves. And so a lot of times salespeople just aren't successful because they're selling. People don't like to be sold to, they like to buy. And so that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Prospecting is proactively working channels to get them to that point where they're sitting down with you to see if they want to do business. Okay, so these aren't the same thing. And the challenge here is that, so when I started in sales, nobody had a computer, believe it or not, right? Amy, you look like you're too young to even realize that there was a time when people didn't have computers. In fact, when I got my first professional sales job, Google was formed 13 years later. There was no internet, right? There wasn't even the government system that the internet was based out of. So when I picked up the phone, people would want to talk to me because that's how they got their information. That's how they found out what was going on, what their competitors were doing. And now everybody is doing that on their own. And so that means is that as people come closer to a buying decision, they're less likely to buy from you. Why? Because They are doing their own research and they want to engage with you when they're ready. Okay, 57% of the buying decisions made before the salesperson gets involved. That means that they've made decisions about what they want, right or wrong, and potentially what you can provide, right or wrong, and probably what your competitors can do, right? So how do you navigate that, right? The biggest competition usually is status quo, right? Don't you find that people are, getting the change is the biggest challenge, right? What's the close rate when they're in status quo? Anybody have a guess? What's your close rate when you're in status quo?
I'd say 75 to 80.
When they're in status quo?
Well, I guess when they've already, they've already been working with a certain company or product or whatnot. So things are moving well. They don't feel like there needs to be any change because
Right.
they're still going unless there was a disruption in either the product or the service, some dissatisfaction. But if they're satisfied, then status quo, I would say is as high as 80%, but maybe higher. I don't know.
If you are the preferred vendor, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yes. But you're not.
I always hope that I am, but
yes. No. Okay. I see what you're saying, Amanda, and you are absolutely correct. If you are the preferred vendor and you're keeping your customer happy, then you should be closing 75 or 80% of your deals, your proposals. Absolutely correct. What I'm talking about, we're talking about getting net new customers. Okay, so you're on the other end of that, right? And by definition, status quo is status quo. They are not changing. That's a 0% close rate by definition, right? So people need to have, as you suggest, a reason to change what they're doing in order for you to even have an opportunity, right? And so that's your job, is to find out what that is. I mean, they're cruising around in status quo. They have to say, all right, we have a problem here. Do we want to address it? And what would be our objectives? And what would be our strategy? Okay? Then they start to explore options. This is usually when they reach out to you. Okay? And they start searching for alternatives. And then they just try to justify, should we make a change or not? And hopefully then you become the new status quo. Okay? The problem is when you catch them down here, or they're calling you to see what you can do, right? That's a 16% close rate. And for a lot of reasons. And I already alluded to one, is that they've already made some decisions. So they may be just calling you to say, hey, let's go talk to, Advantage and see if, we're getting hosed by our existing provider, or, their boss said, listen, go and get some alternate pricing just to see what's available. Okay. So they're engaging you in an exercise of futility. And that's the other problem, is a lot of times, when they're in this bucket of trying to understand objectives and set strategy, the decision makers are 100% involved. And down here, they sometimes tag somebody else, a lower level person, to go do that searching for alternatives. So you're getting engaged with somebody who is not a decision maker. I have a client I'm working with, a software company, and they have a woman that's doing all the prospecting. So she's really great at cold calls. She's setting appointments for the two salespeople every week. They have appointments set for them, but they're showing up and the result was always the same. Hey, this is fantastic. We really need this. Now I got to go talk to. Same conversation every time. The only thing different was who they needed to talk to, but it wasn't them, right? So we fixed that. And so, you really want to see, how can we catch them here? And the more proactive you are, the more likely that you're going to do that. Okay. And according to Forrester research, that's a 74% close rate. So what is going to enable you to do that? You've got to talk about things that are of interest to them. Okay. And so it's a combination, like I said, of marketing and prospecting. Okay. So, these are the elements of your marketing plan: knowing your target markets, knowing exactly what they need and want, and then perfecting that dialogue that gets their attention. And when you do, it has to differentiate you, right? So it's not, listen, we provide better service. It may be in the service that you provide, but you got to be more specific than that. Because one thing, even if your competition is not providing good service, they're not saying, listen, you should do business with us because our service stinks, right? You will not be happy with our service, but you should do business with us. No, they're not saying that. Of course, it doesn't differentiate you. And then when is it that they are going to be in that buying cycle, so that you can look for those things that would indicate they are, and then put an action plan in place to be able to produce leads. Okay. The first thing is, who is it? Because, far too many times, that manufacturers are in so many different diverse markets. They have a piece over here and a piece over here and a piece over there, and they're all different. So if you're going to say, okay, look, I want to be proactive in going after some more business, where are you going to start? And, it's important because if you are, a little player in a lot of different markets, then you really don't have anything big to leverage. It's much better to be a big fish in a little pond, because they get invited to swim in other ponds. And then you're an expert. People like to do business with experts. Right? So all of you are in business to business markets, correct? Business to business, right? So, you want to really think about, where is it that you can really get some traction, or where is your best opportunity? Okay. And here's some criteria through which you can discern what that is. So if you, for example, it could be an industry vertical, right? I'm just going to pick, I'll pick Lawson's at the top of my list, right? So Taylor, you're in real estate, facilities management, schools, municipal, manufacturing, and healthcare. Those are all very, very different markets. So, do you have different salespeople that are working each of those markets? And so, for example, if I were to be going after schools and municipal, those are really congruent markets. So that would make sense to me to have one person addressing that. But if you have somebody that's doing schools and somebody else that's doing manufacturers, well, you have to have two different marketing plans, right? So, but it may not be an industry vertical. It could be how the prospective customers use your products, or how they go about buying. So, at the end of the day, if you're going to prospect, you've got to be able to be talking to these people on a regular basis. And if you can go to a place where they're all there, then that's going to expedite that lead generation. It could be where they're located geographically. So a lot of you are here in New England, and there may be a robust marketplace for you here, enough so that you don't have to go outside of New England. Or it could be that you're very specific in what you do. And, so for example, I have a client that makes vessels that hold very caustic, very dangerous chemicals for the semiconductor industry. You know, they work with some nasty stuff, right? So he makes vessels that contain that. All right. Well, so if you're very specific in your market and it's semiconductors, and he's got good penetration here in New England, well, so how's he going to grow? Well, you know what? His customers are in California. So, you know, he's not going to get a salesperson that's in Ohio. His salesperson needs to be in California, right? And so you got to go where the market is. And then, or it could be, you know, who is most likely to really need your products and services because of their products and services, or it could be the size of the business in number of employees, in revenue, buying capacity. Okay, so let's see, how much time do we have? Why don't we do that? Just take some time and take out a piece of paper and write down one market, just one market that you think you have a lot of potential in, but try to be as specific as possible. Okay, so go ahead and do that. I'll give you 2 minutes. Amy, you look like you're done. What'd you put down?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty easy. So for those of you who don't know, I'm an ISO consultant. So for me, I wrote down manufacturing companies looking to get ISO certified. So for me, it's pretty straightforward and easy.
Okay, and yeah, so but that's so if I did a search, okay, so and for manufacturing companies in the United States that needed to get ISO certified, I'd have hundreds of thousands of prospects, right?
Yeah, maybe it's too wide. I guess probably would start with New Hampshire and maybe start with well, like I said, I'm back and forth between New Hampshire and Europe, but start with Concord, start there. Maybe it's a bit smaller.
Now, ISO regulations, I don't know if regulation is the right word, but they ISO is regulated by certifications, correct?
Right.
Okay, those rules change periodically, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you know, and everybody knows, and all your targets know when a change has been made because they give them notice and they say, all right, in 5 years, you got to comply with this new regulation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I knew that automotive manufacturers need to comply with some new really tough regulation in 5 years, then maybe 5 years is too long. But I would be focused on automotive and I would be all over Detroit or whatever, right? And because I would be like, hey, you know, you're probably wondering how you're going to comply with this, right? And I mean, that is low-hanging fruit, right? So, you know, so I would be paying attention to that and actually start with the ones that are actually 1 year away or 2 years away. And so that might help. And then you can figure out, okay, well, how many of them are there and still maybe there's too many, and then you can focus by geography or focus by size, right? Because maybe the mid-sized businesses don't have the resources the big businesses have. Okay, so does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes big businesses have their own ISO consultant, but not always. But I think that's good advice to start with, to see what standards are going, because we do ISO 9001, ISO 1345, other standards as well, not just ISO. So to see which ones are going to be updated soon, and then kind of target those specific sectors, I guess.
Yeah,
Is what you're
right.
saying, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sure. Let's see, Jeffrey, what'd you put down?
Yeah, so I put down electronics housing. So again, we do plastic injection molding, and as you had alluded to earlier, we're in quite a diverse array of markets, but we do find that we do quite well with demand for various electronics housings for a variety of companies. A lot of them will have certain designs that they may modify periodically throughout the years. They need another hole for a button added or something like that. So it certainly keeps us pretty busy. Based on our machine capacities, we like to produce parts that are, 12 inches or so or less. We can produce larger, but that seems to be a pretty good target, especially for handling purposes and what have you. And most of our markets that we deal internationally, we very much heavily focus on kind of northern New England, north of Boston. So a lot of companies in the Woburn and Nashua, Concord, Manchester, etc.
That's great. I mean, that is very specific. And then, so the only question is how robust is the markets in those areas. And maybe there's, if you go to electronics, you can very easily say, okay, how many electronics manufacturers are there? And then narrow down by geography, or narrow down by product, or narrow down by who has 12-inch products, right?
Yes.
And that's perfect. That's perfect. That, we could create a strategy around that all day long. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Taylor, what'd you put down? Are you there, Taylor?
Yeah, sorry guys, I had to run out to
Oh.
take a call, so I just missed the last. 10
Oh, you didn't do the
minutes,
extra?
so-
Oh, okay. All right, we'll move. We're talking about who you're going after. We did a little exercise there. All right, how about you, Cindy? What'd you put down?
Yeah. Well, I put a couple things down. One is for our aftermarket automotive parts markets with a lot of potential would be fabricators that are making custom air intakes. And additionally, automotive shops that are installing custom air intakes.
Yeah,
Those are two separate markets.
sure. Yeah, and again, you could find those very easily, put a list together and start contacting them. Absolutely. Yeah, very good. Okay, did I skip it? How about Amanda?
So very different. Ours is more service oriented because we're a construction management firm.
Yep.
So we have such a broad market or industries that we operate in, because it can range anywhere from multi-unit housing, like apartment buildings, to manufacturing. But we do have a strength in facilities, manufacturing facilities, because of we have 2 clients that are constantly doing master plans, and we never leave campus. So for us, a lot of it is, I started looking at it as how can I perfect my dialogue? What sets us apart? Our competitors are very well qualified. But our market's always just New Hampshire. We don't go outside of the state lines. And for that, most of it is my focus, because honestly, I'm so across the board. It's like sometimes I can't keep up with, like, am I trying to get a school project or a manufacturing project or a multi-unit housing? But so to focus on where my targets are lately has been to expand our manufacturing clients and potentially do more of that, because we do have a sweet spot for that, because we are constantly doing work at and it ranges from right now, Stonyfield Yogurt is a repeat client for the past 20 years. So is Sig Sauer, firearms manufacturer. So it ranges. It's hard, but how do we set it apart? And most of it's, when and where did we save the save the client money? So trying to really focus on like what sets us apart. And that's difficult. So I have I'm taking what you're saying and kind of how to apply that to a service-oriented firm, rather than trying to sell a product or whatnot. Hopefully I'm doing what I can with that. So I don't know if you have any advice on that, but
Yes, I do. So it took a little longer than I thought on that, but
my apologies.
I am going to get into messaging now, and there's a couple of things. First, what we've been talking about doing this exercise is really who are you going after and what do they really need, and how does that match up with what you're really good at? So that's the internal part of your marketing plan. Then there's the external part, is what's happening out there in the marketplace. Okay. And so that was what I was kind of telling Amy. If there's like some external force in government or legal or regulatory, that is where you want to focus. But it also could be technology. I already told you how technology has affected my business, right? But technology affects everybody's business that might have an impact positively or negatively on your markets, or how people buy, right? Or public perception. I have a lot of clients that sell into aviation, commercial aviation there. And going into the pandemic, Boeing, who was a 10,000 pound gorilla that everybody eventually is making something going into their planes, it was kind of putting their foot in their mouth. And it was affecting a lot of businesses, right? Target customer groups is really what we would just spend the last 10 minutes talking about, but what happens is when you're out there talking to these people in the targets that you picked, you may find, these guys, they are interested, but who really needs it is these people over here, and get you some other direction. Or basic customer desires, or the economy fixes everybody's business. But how many do you have already as customers? And then how many prospects are there in the geographic reach that you're working? And how competitive is it? So these are some things that might help you to focus that. And, I know in construction, so in the recession, the big recession, okay, I had general contractors, subcontractors, building supply distributors, engineering companies, subcontractors, and I had the whole construction vertical, okay? And people who were working multifamily were the ones getting the business, because that's where the market was, okay? And it's still robust because there's a shortage of housing in New England. But what else is going on? We've gone through COVID. How many people have bought something online in the last month? I think everybody's hand's gone up, right? That's a phenomena, a market. It's not going away. Jeff Bezos made sure of that. Okay. So where's the need? Warehouses, logistics, okay? And so you got to pay attention to what's happening in the marketplace to know where the opportunities are. And so that might help you to focus a little bit and get some better traction. The other thing is, keep a pulse on what's happening. There's just a world of information out there. And, that's free, right? Google Alerts. So if you have a company that you think is a good prospect, do a Google Alert. So you anything that's changing with them, you're notified. But, I read the Boston Business Journal. Okay. It's the only publication I read. I get it delivered in print because it's great for me to keep a pulse on the marketplace, and particularly construction. But also biotech and software and I'm not in all those markets, but some of them I am. Manufacturing. So I get some industry reports. I am selective on what data feeds I get, and it's free. If you deal with public companies, they have to report all their financial reportings on the Edgar database. If you deal with startups, anytime somebody invests in a startup, they have to file a Form D, on the Edgar database. So I'm not saying that you need to spend a lot of time before you start reaching out to people. What I'm saying is, just try to keep a pulse on things that are happening, just to give you an idea about trends. Or, if you have the resources, you can buy data, from like, S&P, IQ, or Thomson Reuters, or other R&D resources. Okay. But the other piece that might help you, Amanda, is timing. Okay. And, a lot of this really goes in, can influence the messaging as well. Okay. So how do you catch people right here when they're wanting to decide, should we address the situation or not? And it really depends on what that situation is. So it could be that they're having a bad experience. And in manufacturing, there's a lot of that. I mean, I've had clients that basically are really capitalizing on their competition falling down, on not being able to provide product when they need to. And so there's a lot of that going on, okay? But it could be they just don't like the person, or they don't like the company, or the product's not meeting their needs anymore. The problem with bad experience is you don't know about it until you talk to them, okay? Change are things that you can see. If there's a new let's say there's a new health and safety director at XYZ manufacturing company. Well, you know what? That prospect goes to the top of my list, Taylor, right? That goes to the top of my list. When there's a new person in a new role, they want to make changes, and there's a reason why there's a new person there, okay? If somebody's opening up a new location, if a manufacturer opened up a new product line, Amanda, that company goes to the top of my list, right? They just acquired a new company, so they're going to be consolidating businesses. Anytime there's a change, there's an opportunity, and these are the first thing that people publicize. There's a whole page in the Boston Business Journal about new people and new roles, right? Or LinkedIn is great for that, because you can see that people are, changing their job position. They would tend to go into the LinkedIn and change their profile. Okay. So look for change. And then we already talked about regulatory or any legal things that would help people to focus. And, Amy's situation was a good example for that. Okay. Questions about that?
Well, for me, I also look at whenever a company, especially a New Hampshire company, gets a government contract. As soon as they get that, that's usually going to mean that they're going to expand their production line or their facility, because now they need either more warehousing, or they're going to need more manufacturing space. So.
Great example. That's a great example. Yep. go to the top of the list. Okay? So then you're aiming, and you're focusing and adjust. You focus, you aim, and adjust. And then, what happens is, so when you start the prospecting, which is what we're going to get into now, you know where to go to find them. Right? When you show up there, you can create that message which they relate to, which these are things that they're thinking about now. And when you're putting those messages out there, guess what? Other people notice that know dozens of these people you want to meet, that you can create a collaborative relationship with. Okay? All right. So then, you know who you're going after, you put together your target list. Okay? So there's, different resources, at different price levels. So, if you want to just get a static list, or you want to subscribe to, these actually info Reference USA is now called Data Axle. I should change the slide. Info Free, Info USA, they're all, working, trying to maintain a good contact list. They sell that data. But they're really just using their own resources to keep them up to date. So, you've got to expect maybe 20% bad data at least. And then there's what Dun & Bradstreet and Hoover's merged together years ago, and then they went out and bought some of these technologies that were scraping the web. So they tend to have a lot cleaner data, more expensive though. So it might be like $4,500 for a seat, and then it gets progressively less expensive. Zoom Info is even more expensive, but very accurate data. And they actually will give you leads. Depending on how much you want to spend, you can get information that on people that are actually looking for services. And then there's LinkedIn, which is, a real powerful database in itself, but it doesn't give you, specifics like, size and you need to actually work it as a social media platform to connect with people and educate people before you can reach out. But LinkedIn can give you a lot of information about, you can actually get a pretty good pulse on how many companies there are by using their search functionality and find people. Okay. So, it's a really hugely powerful resource. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the message. People need to have a problem, or they're not going to want to change, right? We talked about that. So what are the problems that your prospective customers are having that they want to fix? Okay, that's the first piece. And, make a list of all the problems that you or your company can solve, right? And then think about what are some of those triggers, like, for example, a new ISO regulation or a government contract, right? So you're on track. Think about those, okay? And then the message is really, normally, we're talking about how we help our customers, okay? And it's when you do that, you're on track, but that's not the message. The message is in the problem that they're having before you help them, okay? But first you need to know, all right, how are you really helping customers? Because the problem is what drove them to you in the first place. So is what you do make them more efficient? Do you help them with their operations? Are you helping them reduce costs? In other words, be more profitable? Are you helping them make a better product? Or help them with generating their next product? Or are you helping them get customers like what I do? Okay. Now you think about, okay, what's the problem they're having in being more efficient with their operations? What's the problem they're having that's affecting their costs? What's the problem they're having in generating the next gen product? What's the problem they're having in getting customers? That's what's going to get their attention. Okay? That's where the message is. And when you do that 180 change, you'll start to get people paying attention. Because when you say, hey, we make you more efficient, so does everybody else, the last 5 people that just called me. We're going to help you reduce costs. Yes, okay, yeah, I get that call every week. Okay? And so you can differentiate yourself by being a little creative and talk about that, what that message is. And so your scripting then really needs to touch the emotion that in what they're concerned about. Okay, so for me, like I said, I'm getting traction in selling the price. Hey, you know what? Selling the price. Little messages about not really recognizing value, blah blah blah, and it catches people's attention. Okay, then you've got to make it clear that you will not steal their time. Nobody wants to talk with you if they think they're going to get a sales pitch. You have to be clear that you're not going to take a lot of their time and then leave them with the impression that they will get some insights regarding their problem. Okay, those are the pieces of an effective message. If you want to get somebody on the phone, touch their emotion, respect their time, and leave them with the impression they're going to get some insights. Then people will agree to give you a little bit of time. That make sense? Okay. All right. And so you can use that information to, as part of your marketing tactics or marketing strategies, right? In B2B, ordinarily, direct response actually works a lot. When you think about it, how much mail do you get, for example, in your office today? Not a lot, right? I went to, I didn't go to my office for over a year, and still my mailbox wasn't full. It was kind of jammed up, but I had a year's worth of mail still fit in my mailbox in my office. How much email do you get every day? A lot, right? Hundreds. So it's not a crowded space, right? But email works too. I mean, I have somebody doing email campaigns for me, and it works. I mean, I get people every week setting appointments with me. Okay, you just got to do enough volume, or just well, in B2B, you have the luxury of the direct response being you as the response mechanism. So if you're going to do that as a channel, make sure that you're calling all of them. Don't send 1,000 out and don't call anybody, right? Send out 25 and call every single one, okay? And measure the result. Social media, LinkedIn, very powerful tool to supplement your prospecting activity. And then more conventional lead gen, that in addition to inbound web strategies and digital, doing seminars, trade shows, associations, and then, good old email and calling, really. Okay? All right, any questions about marketing before we move into prospecting? Nope? Okay. So, we talked about marketing. Now it's time to talk about prospecting. Proactively working channels to get meetings. Okay? And so here's a list of prospecting channels. Some of them are marketing channels, but I tried to be as comprehensive. You may be getting leads from a channel that is not on this list. Just write it down. But what I want you to do is carve up your leads. Where are your leads coming from right now? From which channels? And do it in percentages. So if you get 50% of your business from existing client referrals, put a 50, write that down and put a 50 next to it. If you get 20% of your leads from cold calls, write that down, put 20 until you have 100%. Okay? And when you're done with that, put a line down next to it and then carve up your prospecting time. So when you're prospecting, where does your prospecting time go? So if you spend 50% of your time cold calling, put a 50 down next to that. Or if you spend, 20% of your time on trade shows, write that down, put 20% there, so carve up your prospecting time. By the way, I am not suggesting you should be working all of these channels. I'm trying to provide a comprehensive enough list. And just as a reference, we try to get all of our clients working 4 active channels simultaneously. Just as a reference. But as you look through this and do this exercise, you may be thinking, okay, well, there's a channel here that I'm not working that I should, but it's not going to be a lot of them to start. You're not going to say, okay, I'm working 3 channels now and then I'm going to work 20. No, or work even 10. Maybe you want to pull 1 or 2 more in. And then you can write down that channel. So what did you learn from that, Amanda? Like where are you getting, what channels are you working?
Our biggest channel, ooh, getting some feedback.
Oh,
Not sure that anyone else may.
I can hear
Okay.
you fine.
All right, good. A lot of, like I mentioned earlier, about some of our existing clients. So currently, I'd say right now, if you were today, not every year, because every year changes, but today, I'd say we're getting about 50% from existing clients.
Yeah.
I'd say next to that is alliances and partners, which come referrals and collaborations. So our pipeline is architects, civil engineers, that kind of stuff. So we get about 30% because they put our name forward. So it's maintaining those relationships from past and previous projects we worked on with them. And everything else I'd say is in the 5%. So it's is cold calls, networking, community involvement, and our website SEO. We have a form people can fill out on our website. So every now and then someone fills out that form and then I call them. You know, they've found us on our on the SEO and filled out our information, whatever form on our website, and I call them. So everything else is very small, but yeah, I'd say so that comes to about 80% is from existing clients and or alliances and partners.
That's great. Okay. And did you learn anything about where your time's going?
My time is going really to alliances and partners, maintaining those relationships, that and continuing to ask them, you know, what's going on with them, and then you have to be reciprocal about that, because every now and then those existing clients come to us and say they've got a new project and they want to change that design team. And so for me, it's then I'm putting those partners that we have in touch with existing clients. So it has a little bit of a give and take. So
Yeah, great. I like it. And so you may want to be spending more time in some other channels so you can feed that referral tree a little bit more.
yes, and with that being said, community involvement is one that I'm focusing on for me, which is different, which is getting more involved with Chamber of Commerce's and leadership programs, that kind of thing.
Perfect. I like it. Okay, good. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, so you know, when I look at this list, I would say, you know, well, probably 90% of our sales go through or come from existing clients. The balance, I would say, is from referrals from those clients. So we're trying to expand, you know, looking at marketing promotions, email campaigns, any resources that we can right now.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely, you know, obviously you got existing customer business that come back and buy. You got to get net new, you know, because there's attrition. There is always attrition. And even if there's no attrition, you're not growing. You know, unless you've got a client that's like blowing up, right? And you can't always predict that. So you're not in control of that. And so, yeah, so I would definitely encourage you to pull in some more proactive channels than that. Yeah. Okay, Jeffrey, how about you?
Yeah, so similar to what Taylor mentioned, you know, I would say 50% of what we do is expanding upon our existing business with our current clients. Most of them kind of seek us out and say, I've got new products we want to add to what you already produce. So that's always kind of an easy way to grow the business. Obviously, the concern there is diversification. You know, you get a big account, you've had them for 20 years, and then all of a sudden they're filing for bankruptcy or something bizarre happens. So it's very important to always have, to your point, some new business coming in to kind of hedge those risks. We find, I'm relatively new with this company, but what I've learned here so far is we do trade shows periodically. Obviously, with COVID, that's been shut down. We're hoping to get back into it this fall, depending on where things end up. But we actually get quite a lot of business just from networking at trade shows. Everything else is more referral based, or we also have an SEO. So we do see a little bit that comes in through our website periodically.
Yeah. So yeah, when trade shows come back, that's something you want to jump back into. I would definitely suggest, pulling in 2 or 3 other proactive sources.
One thing too that I would mention, just from a sales perspective is, we're always selling. If I'm out and about, it doesn't really matter kind of where we're at. There's always an opportunity to kind of market the business and subtly sell. I was at the gym the other night talking to a new person that, we were kind of paired up. We had to share some equipment and, what do you do and stuff. And next thing you know, you find out that, you're familiar with each other's companies and some people there. And so there's always that kind of not necessary, hey, I'm going into like a gym environment to pass out business cards, but just that subtle networking, is a good way to build those relationships, find those relationships and potentially build them as well.
Yes, I love it. When you look at the difference between a top producing salesperson and a mediocre salesperson, they're always prospecting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's an opportunity.
Yeah. And so, but I wouldn't say the gym is where you're going to find somebody that needs an injection molding solution. But, the concept that you bring up is an important one.
Right.
And that's really the difference. And they're making their time pay off and not making excuses for why they can't do it. And they don't have time. Well, yeah, I know you got to take orders. You got to do customer service. You got to, you have other responsibilities. But what's more important than bringing in new business?
Right. The nice thing too about that is it's kind of like, traditionally people go out and play golf. I think the younger generations coming up, we're not seeing that as much. I'm not a golfer. I don't get out. I don't network on golf courses and stuff. But when you're in an environment where it's not hey, I'm coming to your business and I need 20 minutes of your time. So, again, the whole sales pitch thing, people don't necessarily like that. It's more casual. So it kind of makes it fun and there's no pressure. And hey, if there's an opportunity, great. If there isn't, well, that's fine too. But it may just be as simple as saying, oh, I know somebody that does this or does that. And I've generated over the years, I've been able to bring in a lot of business in my past roles using that type of way of doing things. And it's not even a conscious thing. It just kind of happens and stuff. So you're not really feeling the pressure as a salesperson to go out and say, I need to generate some leads here this week doing stuff that's maybe off the clock or whatever. It's just kind of organic.
Yeah, right. Okay. Let's see, who had I not asked? I lost track. How about Cindy?
Hi. Yeah. So we are a very small company. So I'm not just doing sales, but operations management, payroll, all kinds of different things. So in any case, in answer to your question, as far as the tool side of the business, which is my sales side responsibility, most of our sales are coming in from existing clients. We also get great client referrals, whether it's construction company to construction company. We've had construction companies recommend us to tool selling folks, and that's how we've gotten some of our new distributors. We have our RFQ form on our website, so we get inquiries in that way. So website search engine optimization. We do emails, but those go to folks primarily that we've dealt with before, so that's not really prospecting for new people. And then as far as the automotive side, one of the channels that's been super effective with us is Facebook groups. And the other thing to do, which is obviously a more internal, is monitoring what's coming in on our e-commerce for people buying multiple pieces or coming back over and over again. And so reaching out to those people and noticing, are they a business, and reaching out to those people to set up wholesale accounts so that we'll be their preferred vendor. So that's kind of what we're doing there. And do have a person that's getting involved in like the racing scene for the automotive side. So the more casual relationship building on that side. But.
Great. Okay, awesome. Let's see, Amy, how about you?
Yeah, so for us, pretty much all of our clients come from referrals. So either like existing clients that refer people to us, or they come back again to do like an internal audit, or like their second year or something like that, or they want to get another standard. And we get a lot of clients from New Hampshire MEP. A lot of clients come to us from there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think, well, for me, I just started in January, but I think what I would like to focus on looking on this list would be trade shows, social media, networking at trade shows, and maybe some email campaigns as well. Just thinking what would work best, and also with what prior experience that I have.
Great. Excellent. Love it. Okay. Now, with your prospecting plan, there's 3 parts. The first part is the channels. That's what we just talked about. What channels are you going to work? Okay. The second part is the formula. What's your formula? Because you need to know how much activity and what activities you do in each channel to execute on your formula. And the formula, it starts with, okay, remember that meaningful goal we talked about at the beginning? How are you going to get there? Right? So if you want another $1 million worth of business, how many deals do you need to close? How many meetings do you need to have? How many conversations do you need to have? And so then what do you need to do to get those conversations? That's the key, because you can't control if somebody's going to answer the phone, be sitting at their desk when you call them. You can't control whether or not they need your service right now, or they're just not ready yet, or they're all set. Okay? What you can control is whether you go to that trade show, whether you pick up that phone, whether you send that email. You are all 100% in control of that. And so what is it that you need to do? And what's that formula? And the formula, it's variable depending on the channel. For example, cold calling is typically a 2% return on invested time, meaning you got to talk to 100 people to close 2 deals. The best I've seen with a client is 11%. I had a client that was cold calling and then closing 11% of the people he talked to. Okay. And I'm not saying cold calling doesn't work or it's a waste of time. What I'm saying is you've got to do enough. Okay. Like I said, I have somebody doing cold emails for me and he sends thousands of them. Right. But it works. Direct mail. We've talked about that. Don't send 1,000 letters, send 25 and call every one and measure the effectiveness. Seminars, workshops, trade shows. Well, networking probably, is in the trade show bucket. But, if you can educate people like this, what I'm doing, then people get to know about you and what you do, and you get to know about them, and you can decide who to follow up with. Networking, same thing. You get to talk to people, and you can quickly find out if there is a concern they have, and then decide who to follow up with. referrals where people are expecting your call. And so I'm, happy to hear that a lot of you do exercise that. And the question is, do you exercise it proactively, or are you leaving them on the table? Okay. And then alliance partners, some of you talked about that, where you have introductions. So like Amanda, for example, on the engineers and the architects. Okay. And those are people that can introduce you to dozens of prospects. And then quality introduction, where the person that you are getting introduced to, the person that's introducing you is there physically when you meet them. And when you're operating up there, that's 95% return on invested time. Okay. But the challenge here is, you can't, let me go to this, right? Common prospecting mistakes, relying just on passive. Okay. And do you know what I mean by what's the difference between passive and active? Amanda, what's the difference between passive and active?
Well, active, common person, like being, no, I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna give up.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure.
Okay. How about you, Amy? Do you know the difference between active and passive?
In this context, I would think active would be cold calling, sending emails. Passive would be more like if I were to buy an ad on Facebook or something, or I don't know, just have like a recurring ad or something.
Yep, absolutely correct, right? So I'm not saying passive doesn't work, right? But some of you, for example, talked about SEO lead, right? But the fact is that you're relying on your customer, your prospective customer, seeing your ad and then taking you up on your call to action and contacting you, okay? So the mistake here is just relying only on passive. Okay, you need to have active channels, and we try to get our clients working 4 active channels simultaneously. The other problem is being too dependent on a single prospecting channel. So if you're just getting all of your business from referrals, the nice thing is referrals is at the top of the return on invested time pyramid. The most efficient, the most effective channel you could be working, which is great. But you can't be relying on a single channel. Now, why is that a mistake? Taylor, why is that a mistake?
I think if you're depending on one channel, it almost becomes passive again. Especially, I guess it's not passive if you're cold calling and that's your one method. But like you stated before, that's a 2% return on investment. So you kind of need to spread out your methods. Some people are going to be more open to those cold calls. Some might, they might not have time to have that conversation, but if you send an email that has kind of the summary of the services that you're providing, you're a lot more likely to meet everybody else's needs.
Yeah, right. The fact is that it's going to dry up. Whatever channel you're working, it's going to go hot and cold. So, but if you're working 4 active channels, they start feeding each other. And you might find that there's 1 or 2 that are primarily producing most of your leads, but the other ones feed it. Okay. And so you will, if you're working just passive or one channel, you cannot avoid the roller coaster. You will have a cyclical result. You will not have consistent results, and you can't predict your growth. So you need to have multiple channels, okay? The next piece is devoting the time to actively prospect, right? So I had a client that's in the telecom industry, and first month we were working together, he booked 160% of his goal, right? And then 2 months later, he was at 50%. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? He said, well, I guess I'm slacking off. I said, well, let me ask you a question. When you first talked to somebody who was interested in maybe doing business with you, how long does it take before they actually buy? He goes, oh, about 60 days. I said, oh, wait, what were you doing 60 days ago? Oh, I was really busy, onboarding all these new customers. Oh, it's not what you're doing now. It's what you did 2 months ago that's created this problem for you, right? The light bulb goes off. So we made adjustments for who was doing what. Because, I get it. He is so focused on customer service, it's not even funny, but he was doing things he didn't need to do because he had good people that take care of that. Okay? And I get it. Maybe you don't have anybody to do that. And you do want to make sure your customers are happy. But what's more important, and you have to think about it, it's like anything else. If you're not going to actively prospect, then it's not important to you. Getting new business, just not important. If it is important, you're going to spend time doing it, and you have to keep doing it, right? Or find somebody else to do it, because you will not avoid the roller coaster if you're doing any one of these three things, or having a plan. And that's what we're talking about here today, is having that plan. The next piece is tracking and adjusting to the effectiveness of your sources. Okay? And we're going to talk about that. Now, somebody's got to do it, right? And sometimes when you look at, all right, what's the plan and who do we need to interact with and who's the best person to do that? I had let me go back to the telecom guy, right? Because another thing that's happened over the last month was he was getting a lot of existing client business because he had customers that 20 years ago put it in an outdated system that's no longer supported. So he's converting them over to a new system, and that's taking a lot of his time, right? But the problem is the sales volume of those deals is 1/6 the revenue of the new deals. And I'm like, and he's been, he came to me and he said, look, eventually I want to build up, get a stronger cash position and then hire a salesperson. If we didn't talk about his business, he probably would have gone and hired an account executive, somebody to go and do the outside sales. I'm like, look, why don't you get somebody to do this existing customer business for you? It's probably a lot easier to deal with existing customers and change them over to a new system than it is to go out and get net new, right? You guys can all relate to that. That's the hard work, right? And then you can find out, get somebody who's really chomping at the bit to go outside, but you can test them on how good they are, and then you can train them to go outside, right? So you got to figure out, if you get a lot of leads coming in and you need somebody to qualify those leads, well, that's a lower level, maybe inbound market response rep. If you just need somebody to go out there and bang the phones for you and develop and qualify deals for you, then maybe what you need is an outbound sales development rep. Okay? Or if most of your potential is with existing customers, then maybe what you need is account managers. Or you need somebody to go outside. So, you got to look at, all right, well, where are you spending your time? And then who do you need to plug in? Okay. And then the last piece is, what do you need to track? I find that, a lot of times actually, when I first start working with a company, they're not even using a CRM. I mean, they got salespeople that have a database on a spreadsheet or in their Outlook. And it's like, well, how do you know who to call? Well, I got a good list and I start with A. Someday I'll get to Z, right? You know, it's like, you need to prioritize your list, get the list and then prioritize it based on criteria. But then you also need to know how efficient you are. So how do you know where you're stuck or where you can improve? And sales efficiency is in ratios, just like business economic efficiency is in ratios. And you need to have the data to be able to compute your ratios, your KPIs. Everybody knows if you made a sale, right? Because you got to invoice your customer. You know if you made a sale. How much business are you bringing in? If you're a salesperson, you know that because that's what you get paid on, right? Every month, every week, how much business you booking. Then you also know if you closed a deal, right? It's a simple ratio. What's the average dollar value? If you're calculating your formula and the next step, you've got a revenue goal. The next question is how many deals do you need to close? What's the average customer value? But if you find that you're closing deals but not hitting your revenue goal, maybe that's where your problem is. The deals are too small. Maybe you need to be talking to different prospects. Maybe you need to do twice as many as you thought. But you got to make an adjustment there, right? But if you're tracking that simple ratio, then you could determine you need to make an adjustment or not, right? But if you're not closing deals, then look at how many proposals you're doing. Because if you're doing a lot of proposals and not closing the deals, now you know where to fix, who you're proposing to, and how are you making those proposals. That's what my software client's problem was, right? And you can fix that. But if you're not putting out proposals or quotes, then how many appointments are you having? How many meetings are you having on new opportunities? Because if you're having a lot of meetings and it's not turning into proposals, then it's clearly who you're talking to and how that meeting goes. And but if you're not having appointments, how many contacts you're making? Because if you're having a lot of contacts and you're not getting meetings, that's where you need to fix it. But if you're not getting contacts, it's everything we've talked about up to this point. What are you doing to produce leads? And where are your leads coming from, which channels, and what's your lead conversion ratio? Okay. So, I find that a lot of times, my clients are using CRMs and they're tracking their pipeline and their database really well, but they're not getting this data out and managing that data to really just know where they're getting stuck or what their efficiency is at these different stages and where they can improve. Okay, and it's really important to be doing that. Any questions about tracking? I think we're out of time. So I want to open it up for questions. Any questions? All right, I'll stop the recording.